I want to thank PlayStation Canada for providing a code for review. The Last of Us was originally released back in 2013 on the PS3. It was released to critical acclaim and was praised for its storytelling. At the time, I had never played a game with such depth and story, and a game that made me feel so emotional. The story was captivating, but everyone talked about the decisions along the way. It wasn't just a zombie game, it was heartwarming, suspenseful, and heartbreaking. It pushed the PS3 to the limits and didn't look at like any other game we'd ever played in that generation. Re-released in 2014 on the PS4 as a remaster that came with DLC Left Behind, along with better frame rates and graphics than its original release. The Last of Us Part 1 remake is rebuilt from the ground up with new assets and character models. Even though I was skeptical when it was announced, I even had more doubts after the leaks. They have included Left Behind DLC in this version as well. Neil Druckmann mentioned when releasing this remake that it allowed him to show the true vision behind the game. But at the time, the consoles couldn't do what he wanted when he originally made the game. I'm going to dive into what the difference is between this release and the previous ones, talk story, gameplay, graphics, and share my viewpoint that I'm playing this as a father for the first time. I've finished this game 4 separate times, and every time my daughter wasn't born yet, so playing this game, it was a bit emotional. I wasn't a father when I played the game in the previous versions, and I will say this playthrough felt very different. So the questions I'm going to try and answer are, is this game worth $70? Can a 10-year-old game feel different? And is this the greatest video game of all time? I'm Court Lalonde from 3 Dads and a Console, and this is Last of Us Part 1 Remake in review. I was initially going to go into full spoilers, but even though it's a 10-year-old game, I still don't want to do that to people that have never played it. So I'll do my best not to give away all the story. The story is about a world being wiped out by a plague that turns humans into zombie-like states called the Infected. You drop right into the beginning of it, and you're seeing through the eyes of Joel's daughter, Sarah. Joel's daughter, Sarah, is fatally shot in his arms by the military, whose sole purpose is to protect, but they end up killing civilians during the chaos. You find yourself as Joel in Boston in a world that's been living with the virus, doing its best to survive. Joel's been forced to do whatever it takes to stay alive. Joel and his friend Tess have some guns stolen from them and end up being sold to a radical group called the Fireflies. To get these guns back, Joel and Tess agree to take on the young girl, Ellie, across the U.S. to the Firefly Medical Facility. Ellie has been bitten, but is immune to the virus, so they have to get her to this medical facility. From here is where it all starts. They are met by many obstacles and have relationships grown along the way, and suffer much loss. The relationship between Joel and Ellie will grow throughout the story and become father-daughter dynamic by the end. This is seen early on where Joel and Ellie and Tess look up at the Capitol building from a Boston rooftop, and Ellie says, "Look at the view." Joel then looks at her from afar for the first time and sees Ellie not as a trading piece, but reminds him of his daughter Sarah. This is the first time Joel lets down his walls from his anger of what has happened in his life. We will meet a whole cast of characters throughout his journey, which all seem to bring out the best and sometimes the worst in Ellie and Joel. As the story progresses, the bond between Joel and Ellie grows stronger. At one point, Joel almost leaves Ellie with his brother Tommy to take Ellie the rest of the way to the Fireflies, leading to one of the most powerful scenes I have ever played in a video game. Believe me when I say this game is full of them. Ellie runs away after finding out Joel is giving her to Tommy. When Joel finds Ellie, she lets Joel know that she knows about Sarah. Ellie opens up to Joel and lets him know she loves him. But Joel pushes her back, keeping those walls up because he's afraid to be hurt again. He says to her, "You're not my daughter, and I'm sure as hell not your dad." Joel realizes after saying this that he's gone too far and that he truly does love Ellie. So he tells Tommy that he's going to take her the rest of the way. This only strengthens the bond that eventually will lead to the end of the game, where Joel makes the ultimate decision. I will say that they've changed the ending a bit, and I'm expecting a lot of controversy surrounding that. The visuals have taken a considerable leap forward from the previous versions of the game, which with better water effects, and the environments look more realistic and alive. You can play the game on either performance mode, which is dynamic 4K, which targets 60 frames per second, or fidelity, which is 4K and targets 40 frames per second. I did my playthrough on performance. The character animations is where I felt the power of the PS5 really stood out. The raw emotions you can see in the characters' faces could move you in a way that the previous versions of the game didn't. When Ellie is killing David, you see the brutality and the raw emotion in Ellie's face. When Joel grabs her and says, "It's okay, baby girl," you hear no sound after that, and they just let the characters' raw emotions and reactions tell you the story. This scene felt so much more powerful in this playthrough because of the updated character models and facial animations. The gore in this game has been stepped up a notch from previous versions and is very noticeable. They've done a fantastic job in letting the images speak to how violent this world you're playing in is. They have added elements to the environment and changed what water looks like, bringing the game to life more. The rats are something I've noticed a lot more in the game than in previous playthroughs. Having these subtle nuances really showed the beauty and the despair in the environment. The enemies like clickers look much more menacing, and the spores you see in the air almost look like a fog that you can feel. They've added many different accessibility features to the game that act as visual aids, which they've had in The Last of Us Part 2, but not in Part 1 previously. They've added colorblind mode, which changed the color palettes for the HUD, and screen manufactors so you can increase the zoom on the picture you see. They've added so many more graphical accessibility features that they should be praised for it and could constitute its own review. I will say right off the bat, play this game with headphones to experience the spatial audio of the game. They have accessibility features for the audio as well, with screen reader, cinematic descriptions, and even using the DualSense vibrations as audio and combat cues. To be able to hear a raindrop behind you, or an enemy like a clicker to know exactly where they are on the screen based on sound, is a whole new level of immersion. I almost want to play the previous versions again to just test out the audio. They've added the ability to speedrun the game and see if you can beat your times. They've changed the enemy AI to make them more responsive and intelligent. The enemies will no longer hide behind something so you can just shoot them in the head when they pop up. The enemies go after you, evade you, and they try and come up behind you and kill you. The difficulty settings have been changed. So now they offer very light, moderate, hard, survivor, grounded, and custom. With gameplay modifiers, you can spend points earned during your playthrough to cheat and help you with your new Gameplay Plus. The DualSense adds a whole new dimension to the game as you feel when you fire a gun or when you pull back on the bow. You get resistance in the triggers. The weapon sway and the shooting still doesn't feel like most modern games, but the sway can be changed via the upgrade tree. Upgrading your weapons is essential as you progress so that you make sure collecting parts and upgrade parts so you can use your workbench to better have a chance against these enemies. The crafting system feels just as good as it did in the previous games, and I still love the sound it makes when you craft individual items. The combat doesn't feel much that it's changed, besides the enemies having more intelligent. The Left Behind DLC is a must-play, but I was hoping they just added it to the story instead of having to go back and play it after you finish the game. After playing through the story of The Last of Us, Part 1, for my 5th time, I can safely say this is the definitive version of the game, unless they make it on PC. It did feel different, and the updates made it feel like I was playing a different game. I have never felt so emotional playing through a game as I did through The Last of Us Part 1 Remake. I knew it was about to happen, but it was so much more impactful during this playthrough. I'm kind of guess on this one because I was a dad. As I was playing through the beginning of this game, and when Joel's daughter Sarah dies, I literally had to put down my controller and walk away for a bit. Playing this version of the story made me realize that The Last of Us Part 1 is probably one of the greatest video games of all time. It transcends gaming. It feels like you're watching a movie. As a parent, though, I would highly recommend you do not play this in front of your kid. Is this game worth paying $70 for? For me, yes, but it might not be for everyone. I would say if you've never played this game before, I would highly recommend it. If you have played it before and didn't love it the first time, then I doubt this version is going to change your mind.